Hello everybody, welcome to the video. In this video I'll be talking about The House, which is a Netflix special. Different places on the internet I think have had a hard time sort of classifying this one. It's officially listed on Netflix as a special, but then on IMDb all the credits are based on episodes. Technically speaking, it's an anthology movie. It's an hour and 37 minutes in total, and it's 3 different short films basically, but they share a setting in common, which is a house, of course. They also share certain themes. It's lent a sense of conceptual clarity. As it turns out, all 3 shorts were written by the same person, someone named Enda Walsh, an Irish guy. I didn't think I'd be familiar with his work, but it turns out that he also wrote the screenplay for Hunger, I believe, the Steve McQueen film, the living Steve. I think Stephen McQueen is what he goes by. I think he's a knight too at this point. If you ever want to ruin your day, just watch Hunger. Like, it's very, very good, but my God, is it difficult to get through. 3 different sets of directors. I'll put up names on the screen. I do want to give credit where credit's due. I was not familiar with the work of any of these directors. I looked up some of their other stuff on IMDb. For each one, you can see some similar visuals in some of their other short films. It seems that most of them have worked in stop motion pretty extensively prior to this project, and my very general impressions at the top here is that it's very good. It's very good. I was a little bit concerned, I guess I could say, at the very start of it, or just having seen the trailer. Going into it, I was a little bit worried that it would be kind of just sort of a shade of what was going on in The Shivering Truth. I talked about The Shivering Truth a while back here on the channel, and I absolutely loved it. It was incredibly dense and genuinely very weird and disturbing at times, genuinely frightening at a few moments, also just very funny. I'm a huge fan of that show. I kind of had this idea that, oh no, what if that's like the ultimate standard for weird, creepy stop motion horror? What if nothing else can sort of live up to that standard? But my fears were assuaged, I guess we could say, when I actually started watching The House, because I was just plain captivated. I think the first short in particular is very, very strong. It's probably not my favorite. The third short is probably my most favorite of all of them. But like I said, we do get that conceptual clarity throughout each of the shorts, though we do get some visual variety and a pretty wide breadth of variety in terms of the characters. And we do get consistent themes and motifs. I mean, obviously the house itself serving as sort of a central location for all of these shorts. Also in the first episode, the first short, we get the origins of the house, so you already have a pretty good idea of why there's some weird stuff going on with the house to begin with. And the other characters, of course, there's a lot of time jumps, right, from one short to the next, so the other characters are most likely completely unaware of the origins of the house and that it's maybe sort of cursed in a way, or just that some weird stuff's going to happen with it. And one of the most consistent, I don't know if we could call it a theme as much as a motif, a lot of these do seem to center on characters who just don't have a lot of money. Some of them are outright impoverished. Some of them are just kind of like have made some mistakes with their money, or just through sort of circumstances beyond their control, they don't end up with, exactly what they wanted. It's very interesting. This is a larger topic, so I'll just touch on it very briefly here. But in general, I think it's very difficult to get really good work, really good, specifically movies or television about poverty or debt or things like that, specifically because people who make media and get it widely distributed tend to have money. That's part of the thing. Like, there's a lot of money in entertainment, at least at some of the highest levels. So when you hear a primetime television show trying to talk about a family not having any cash, you're like, okay guys, but everyone working on the show is set. You've got some cash. So sometimes it can feel a little disingenuous to sort of have those types of characters, have those types of circumstances for your characters. But here I thought it felt very genuine. I don't know, some of the horror comes from that. Some of the horror just comes from your perception of the mental state of the characters, and just how in basically every one of the shorts they're trying to get out of a situation. It's not always a sort of literal thing that they have to get away from, but in some way they are trying to escape. I don't think that's a spoiler to say. I think that's a very good, that's a really good premise. I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. I think a lot of us can relate to being in a situation where we want something to change and nothing's happening, and we're trying this and that, and and nothing seems to really work. Here's what I'll do. I'll run through some brief thoughts on each of the shorts. I will try my best to avoid spoilers. I don't want this to be a spoiler review. I do think it's worth checking out, for sure. But the first short, it definitely reminded me of House of Leaves, if you ever read that sort of previously trendy book back in the early 2010s or something. If you've read the book, you'll probably know which aspect of it I'm referring to here, especially since we're all centered on a house in this special, this Netflix movie. There are also elements of like the Winchester house story, you know, the story of the Winchester house where she came from. She was an heiress of the Winchester rifle fortune, and she kept adding insane additions to the house, and it just, you know, it didn't make any sense, and she was maybe going crazy and all this kind of stuff. There are a lot of clever details in this short as well. Overall, I think it's a very decent premise. It seems to be set in, I would say, I don't know, maybe 1800s? No, it would have to be like Victorian era, I think, specifically the early part of the 20th century, because they do have electric light, so that would have to be sometime in the 1900s. And it's all based on a family. The kids in the family are sort of our actual protagonists here, and it does have that very disturbing component of like the parents sort of stop being responsible and the kids have to step up. I think that's always kind of an uncomfortable concept, especially when you apply it to real life situations. I was very happy with the first short. I do think it's probably one of the creepiest. There are just so many little touches in here that just throw you off balance. You're just like, ooh, I don't want more of that. Thank you very much. Moving on to the second short. I don't know. I think maybe some people would, basically the very end of the second short, I could see some people arguing that this is some of the most uncomfortable content in the whole movie. I liked it fine overall. This is definitely one of those more like just genuinely stressful things as opposed to being really creepy and scary. There are bits that are kind of scary, but for the most part, I think it's just like, oh no, this feels like a stress stream. You know what I mean? Like just, oh, I have to get this one thing done and stuff just keeps getting in the way. I just can't help it. It's no good. And I thought it was very well done. Jarvis Cocker plays the lead. I think his character is just called like a developer, and he's trying to fix up his house, sell it off. But things don't go as he planned. I'll put it that way. I don't know. I think I would also compare this to a lot of Charlie Kaufman work. Some of it does reach that fever pitch of just like, it kind of has the tone of a stress stream, or just becoming very fixated on something and not being able to figure it out, or having things not go the way you wanted them to go. I enjoyed it very much. I didn't have too many notes on this one. There's a nice little time-lapse sequence in here. I know I haven't talked too much about the visuals of the house, but it's all beautifully done. The sets are lovely, and especially, well, through all three of them. But the first one in particular has the character models have a wonderful sense of texture. They have these very felty, fabric-y faces. Fabric is also kind of integral to that first short. But the second one's great. I liked it quite a bit. And yeah, like I said earlier, the third one's probably my favorite of the three. This is the one that features little cat characters. The second one is like rats. Third one is cats. And then the first one is, I guess, humans of some kind. This is very good. Basically, the premise is you have this cat woman who she's been trying to fix up this giant, well, it's the house from all the shorts previously. And she's trying to rent out different rooms to people, but most of the tenants have left. And she just has a really hard time keeping the place together. And things just aren't working out at all. She's trying her best. Things aren't working, and no one seems to care about her problems. This one probably has the largest number of surreal elements. I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. It's also, I don't think I would even call this third short horror. Honestly, I don't know if that's a spoiler either, but that's just not what it is. I guess there are a couple of elements that could be considered kind of creepy or weird, and it does kind of have that stress stream vibe of the second short too. It's not that. It's a very different genre, and it was certainly a conscious choice to end the whole movie on this short. It's also the most positive of the three. Without getting into any spoilers, I'm going to try to summarize sort of the message of this final short, which is maybe the message of all three. And I'm even going to tie this into something that I remember from my college days. And when we were reading some Joyce, we were reading Ulysses, one of the most famous James Joyce books, and one of the more comprehensible ones as well. But anyway, here's a decent analysis of like the meaning and messaging of Ulysses, or at least one interpretation of it. The whole book, there's so much going on, there's so much craziness, there's so much stress and anxiety and worry and strife and challenge. But the arc of the entire book, if we can all even call it an arc, is basically a character just saying no, 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 over and over again, resisting things in their lives, finding challenge, finding things to get upset about. And then it ends literally on a yes. I think one of the final words is yes, of course. Repeated yes, in fact, specifically within a sexual context, actually. That's the whole book. It's just saying no over and over again until finally getting to yes. I've heard that sort of progression compared to life itself. Like staying alive, the act of surviving and being a person in the world, doing all the things you're supposed to do, is an act of no, if you will. It's saying no, it's resisting certain things, it's doing your best to struggle against sort of the way of the universe at large. Sorry, this is getting a little bit abstract. And then death, ultimately, sorry to get heavy, is the eventual yes. That's when we finally let go and say, okay, I did as much as I can do. This is it. I'm moving on now. I'm transitioning to something different. I definitely felt that very strongly, that sort of progression here in the third short of the house. It's a very positive message overall. I do think it had something very nice to say, and as I mentioned earlier, using this as the last short of the three was a very interesting choice. It does seem that they were heading in the direction of something more positive, and it would be interesting to rewatch the first two shorts with that in mind. I do think I would maybe pull some different interpretations from specific elements that were presented there, but honestly, that's basically everything I have to say about the house at the moment. I definitely recommend watching it. I mean, most people have access to Netflix, I think, at this point, so go ahead and check it out. I'll find something else to talk about soon enough, but that's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.